Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon everyone, and welcome to the semi-annual edition of the Green Print Showcase Registry. When we talk about sustainability, there's a lot of, there's a lot of different aspects of sustainability, whether is it reporting, whether is it financing, whether is it certification. But I think eventually all aspects of this sustainability all revolves to one point, data, which leads me to the theme of today's event, data-driven sustainability, and us being the Asia's net zero pathway. Today, we have the utmost honor to actually unveil to you ESGpedia version 2.0. Yeah. Our launch was actually one year ago, around this time as well. So I think it's really, on our end, it's really for us to be very excited, to actually share with you some of the different updates, in terms of the data, in terms of the tools, the solutions that we have embedded in ESGpedia. And of course, we are thrilled to everyone having joined us, be it physically or virtually as well. Whereby we get to witness, greater data coverage, better solutions and analytics, as well as a digital assessment tool, to actually help financial institutions, corporates, and SMEs actually embark on their decarbonization and sustainability journey. I am Benji from the Business Development Team at STACS, and I'll be your MC for today. And of course, before we begin, we'd like to express our sincerest thanks to our official event partner, Amazon Web Services, AWS, for jointly organizing today's showcase. And of course, guest speakers, Zhang, Head of the Ecosystem and Partnership Green FinTech Office at MAS, as well as Dr. Joey Tan, Head of Sustainability ASEAN at Amazon Web Services, for gracing our event. Last but not the least, we thank you all for joining us today for our showcase. Here at Amazon Web Services Singapore, we have more than 100 in-person attendees, and as well another 200 attendees tuning in virtually. The audience represents a wide mix of financial institutions, corporates, SMEs, and our partners from all over the world. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. Without further ado, can I please invite on stage a guest speaker, Mr. Zhang, Head of Ecosystem and Partnership Green FinTech Office at the Monetary Authority of Singapore.
I didn't know my picture is going to be this big on the screen. Hello everyone, my name is Zhaoqi. I head up the Ecosystem and Partnership function at MAS Green FinTech Office, or what is more commonly known by the industry as Project Green Print Team, right? So looking at the audience today, I think I'm kind of underdressed for the occasion, but overdressed if you take FinTech dress code as a benchmark. Yeah, so very happy to be here today to support STACS Showcase, which has now become an annual affair. STACS has been a very supportive partner to Greenprint to power our ESG registry function. And I have to applaud STACS marketing team for doing a great job, because apparently more people know about STACS than they do about Greenprint. And I was talking to some of you before coming up here, and they have been somewhat confused by what exactly Greenprint is and how STACS has been part of that. So I think since I have the luxury of speaking first, I will take the opportunity to kind of give you a bit more context on how Greenprint came about, what we're doing, and what we plan to do together with our partners like STACS. Right. So Greenprint, as an idea, was somewhat conceptualized back in 2019, when the team then within MS was given the task to grow ESG fintechs. So naturally, they took the term ESG fintech and they dissected, and that broke into three components, right? ESG, fin, and tech. So on ESG is about frameworks, data points, both qualitative and quantitative, to measure your ESG performance. On fin, it's about financing. How does a bank charge its customers? What level of interest rates it should charge? What's the insurance premium that an insurance company should levy to its customers? And if you're an asset manager, how much alpha can you generate? So it all comes down to dollars and cents, numbers. And for tech, fundamentally and underlyingly, it's about zeros and ones, right? So it's all about data points. So naturally, the team then went to look at how they can address the ESG data issues in the market. And that's something that we still hear today as complaints from the market, that financial institutions, as users of these data points, oftentimes lament that they don't have enough data, they don't have enough quality, verifiable data to make their financing decisions. So on the back of that, the team then came up with 4 data utilities in their attempt to address this ESG data gap in the market. So first of which is disclosure, which seeks to address the 0 to 1 problem, right? So you don't have data. How do you get companies to disclose the data to make available some of these data points so that users can use them for their financing decisions? So that's disclosure, the first one. Secondly, once you have all these data sources available, how do you then streamline access from multiple data sources all leading to one entity? So that's the many to one problem, which is the registry function that STACS has been supporting us on. And the third pillar would be the notion of a data highway, which we call a data orchestration. Simply put, that is to address the many data sources onto one streamline aligned format and then pump out to many users. So many to one to many kind of problem. That's the data orchestration. And lastly, it's a marketplace idea of matching supply and demand. So many to many kind of matching. So these are the 4 pillars that the team came up with around 2019, 2020 as the building blocks of Greenprint. Out of the 4, about a year ago, so last May, we've launched the first of the 4, the ESG registry, together with STACS. That's in May last year, right? Which is to streamline access to the provenance of ESG data and international certification across different sectors and different international data sources. So that's our registry. For disclosure, in September last year, we have launched ESG Gnome together with SGX, which is a disclosure platform starting with the listcos to help them simplify their ESG disclosure process. So to date, these are the 2 live Greenprint platforms, each supported and empowered by our fintech partner vendor. And the basic layer of the functions on both platforms would remain as a public good and free for access for everyone. So specifically on the ESG registry function, which is powered by STACS, very happy to note that ESGpedia is moving into its version 2.0, suggesting greater coverage, more sophisticated solutions to support the users. And we will hear some of these use cases afterwards, right? Ranging from textile to real estate to supply chain, and most of which tying back to a financing use case powered by the banks. So I think that the fact that you have all these users and FIs willing to share their experiences and their use cases openly today, it's a very strong validation to our initial hypothesis that there is huge value to be captured if we manage to address the ESG data gaps in the market and people are actually willing to pay for these solutions. So as ESGpedia moves on to version 2.0, we're doing the same at Greenprint. So Greenprint will be unveiling its own Greenprint 2.0 later in the year as well. And today, let me just give you a snapshot of how that 2.0, Greenprint 2.0 might look like. On the disclosure front, so we're going to scale the ESG Gnome utility into a national platform and then into a regional platform to extend the coverage beyond list codes. So eventually all private companies, largely the SMEs, will be able to use the platform to disclose their ESG matrix, right? Of course, we understand that it's very hard to get the SMEs started on that journey because the internal drive, internal motive is not strong enough, right? To date, oftentimes the market has been relying on external factors to drive SMEs to disclose their ESG points. There are 3 levers. One is financier driven, so your bank's telling you, the SME, to disclose in order to secure a financing package. Secondly, it's a supply chain driven, which is your customer telling you you should disclose or otherwise you're out of my supply chain. And then the last one will be regulatorily driven, right? So regulators telling you you have to disclose. This is part of the requirement. All of the 3 are right now not strong enough to get the SMEs started. So in order to facilitate adoption, what we're doing now is to try to work with the tech providers and the government entities as single source of truth to automate the pooling of SMEs data points with consent, of course, as much as possible, right? So think of how you do your tax filing today. You log into IRAS with your SingPass. It's already pre-populated. All you need to do is check and overwrite if you think there's something more you can provide. And then upload your supporting documents, click submit, it goes in. Right, so we are envisaging the same for SME ESG disclosure. Companies logging in using their core pass, and then give consent to pull data from, say, EMAs, utility bills, PUB's water usage, all these government sources. And what they see upon logging in is most of the data fields, if not all, have already been pre-populated or estimated for them. All they need to do is check, overwrite with supporting documents, and then click submit. It goes in. So that's what we're doing on the disclosure front. And of course, you might wonder, this is possible with Singapore because we have the national infrastructure to support digital ID. What happens if it's a company that's outside of Singapore, right? So on that front, we are also working with international bodies and multilaterals to foster a similar partnership globally and to work with the in-country data sources to again try to pre-populate and automate this process as much as possible. And we'll be making some announcements in this space very soon, so please watch out for that and then stay informed of what's coming up next. So that's on disclosure, right? For the registry function, of course, we have now ESGpedia 2.0, and I hope that can and will continue to support our registry function. Part of that would still remain as a public good. And of course, for the other commercially viable use cases, and then STACS will continue to monetize them as part of their business activities and BAUs. Right, so that's on disclosure. That's on the registry. And lastly, to pull all this loose federation of platforms together under one roof, we are building and we will be launching our marketplace sometime in the future. So eventually, this marketplace will help to support and enhance the visibility and discoverability of ESG data and ESG solutions, so addressing the many-to-many problems eventually. And to a large extent, the originally envisaged data orchestration function will be folded under this marketplace setup. So I think for the rest of this year, at least, the priority will be building up the disclosure platform, the scaling of the ESG norm, and putting in place all these automation functions. And of course, at the same time, continue to align with ESG registry and STACS, so that when we are ready to launch the marketplace, we have a rich pool of data assets to support the marketplace functions. Right, and of course, we can't do this alone, all by ourselves. Our team is very small, so we would like to seek all your support and your involvement in this journey. After all, I mean, it's an ecosystem play, and as my title suggests, it's all about building partnerships to build up that vibrant ecosystem to get there. So hope to see all of you on our journey to make Greenprint a success. And with that, thank you very much, and please enjoy the rest of the program.
Thank you, Mr. Zhang. So I think the main takeaway, from what he just shared, I mean, of course, firstly, data, especially self-disclosed data, which is not publicly available. And of course, with digitalized self-assessment tools, I think slowly we can actually get more coverage of such private data as well. Yep. And of course, another point on the ecosystem, we wouldn't have been able to do all this, without the help of our partners, be it financial institutions, be it certification bodies, whether it's tech providers or even trade associations. And of course, linking to that, I would like to also invite, this event would not have been possible without our event partner as well, Amazon Web Services. And with that, I'm pleased to invite Dr. Joey Tan, Head of Sustainability ASEAN from Amazon Web Services.
Thank you. So I'd like to thank Benjamin and the team from STACS for hosting this event over at AWS. And thank you, Zhaoqi, for gracing us with his very nice opening comments. I'd like to maybe take the next few minutes to share our view on the challenges that's facing the industries when it comes to sustainability. For most of the folks who have worked with AWS, there's a strong tendency for you to think of AWS as a technology provider. But the world has moved on. Today, we are present in most of the sectors. If you go to every single market today, there's a good chance that somebody in the organization is familiar with what Amazon is doing and also what AWS is bringing to the table. So across ASEAN, as we engage with the regulators in all of this market, the central banks, the stock exchanges, the exchange commissions or the security commissions, you realize one prevailing themes that is been surfacing. Everybody is trying to be the queen bee. They are trying to figure out who will be the one driving the standards, who will be the one that entice and bring the market along. So in our conversation so far, one thing that came to mind very frequently is the fact that there is a lot of friction when it comes to adopting a sustainable reporting or disclosure or ESG. So starting from, if we look at some of the comments that was brought up by Zhaoqi, there is a whole bunch of challenges in the market today coming from standards and certifications. Assurance is one of the big areas. And a lot of those problems doesn't go away because there is a lack of true data capabilities in the organization. They do not know where to start. And if you look at the market in play, if we look at, say, supply chain, for example, most of the customers that we spoke to in the market, they are trying to drive their SMBs to adopt best practices when it comes to sustainabilities. And today, those cannot be done without a single data registry. So we are very fortunate to be really understanding what Greenprint is doing. And in fact, a lot of countries that we work with are modeling themselves in similar context to what Greenprint of MAS is trying to do here. So firstly, I'd like to maybe share the fact that in the ecosystem play, where AWS is coming from is that we're taking a sectorial view. We are looking at all the sectors individually, figuring out what are the ecosystem dynamics in each of these sectors, working with key partners from FSI, from the solution providers, with the regulators to figure out what are the regulatory headwinds, and then partnering with partners in the market to drive an ecosystem approach to solve the sectoral issues. So again, with all the audience today, I hope to interact with you more. And I think at some point there will be possible collaboration. We can work together, especially in Southeast Asia and Asia Pacific region. So I thank you very much for having us, for being here today.
Thank you, Dr. Joby. And now, I would like to invite on stage our founder and managing director of STACS, Mr. Benjamin So. So STACS is a Singaporean ESG fintech company headquartered in Singapore. So we started ESGpedia 1 year ago. And today, Ben will be sharing more on ESGpedia 2.0 on our enhanced data coverage, further solution and tools, and of course, the launch of the ESBN Asia Pacific Green Deal. Ben, over to you.
Hi guys. Mic check. Okay, yeah. Thanks everyone for attending, and luckily there's no picture of me. If there's any picture, it'll be many years ago before STACS. Yeah, no time to take picture now. But anyway, thanks again. Firstly, thanks to all our valued guests and also to the host, AWS. Where did Joey go? Yeah. But anyway, thanks for having us in your venue. It's a very lovely place, and it's also very symbolic that we are in the place where all our solutions are housed on. Yeah, so not only are we on your cloud, we are also now in your office. Okay, but more importantly, I also recognize that the value of the ecosystem partnerships that are together in this room, as Benji mentioned and as Zhaoqi and Joey mentioned, we have really a lot of different people from different sectors, doing different parts of the value chain of sustainability together. And that's the only way that we can grow or go fast together, right? So, there's a saying that alone we can go fast, together we can go far. However, for sustainability, I actually think that we should do both. And I would like to leave a quote from Amazon, because I was reading Amazon's sustainability report of 2020, and the front page says very clearly, further and faster together. And so, that report actually got me thinking, for sustainability, we cannot be fast alone. We also need to be far. And we cannot go far, but go slow. Right? So with sustainability, I think it's been an interesting journey so far in the last 1 year, whereby we could see the spirit of collaboration, be it the different financial institutions, or be it the different service providers, or be it the tech firms, the certification bodies, all working together for a common goal. And that's what we need, because this is the only planet that we have. All right, so with that, I would like to talk more about how we have progressed over the past year, right? Because as mentioned by Benji, the MC for the day, okay, we actually launched ESGpedia 1.0 last year. Okay, and yeah, the MAS was there too to help us open, the platform last year. Okay, so more importantly, over the past year, this is now 2.0. We have been focused on taking in feedback from the industry, working with the industry to focus on these three things, right? So these three things that I wake up every morning and ask myself, what are we doing for these three things? Firstly, okay, data, right? We work to expand the coverage of data, okay? Secondly, solutions. Data by itself is not quite enough, all right? With data, yes, we can provide a utility, but we need to provide solutions where users could use this data meaningfully. And of course, thirdly, to expand the impact, to amplify the impact, we need to focus on an ecosystem where synergistic growth could be generated. And why is this important? Because sustainability is an entire value chain, right? We have the SMEs at the top of the producing chain, okay, producing goods and services for large corporates, where large corporates consume these services, okay, and therefore, okay, they would be able to be involved in stewarding the entire supply chain. And financial institutions bankroll, okay, all of them, right? Either SMEs or the corporates. So, again, very happy that we have all of these persona in the room today. We have the SMEs, STACS is an SME, by the way. Okay, so we're probably the smallest company here. Okay, so we are SME. We have large corporates, several large corporates here. We also have financial institutions. Actually, many of you are here. Okay, so this is an entire value chain where we do have to work with each other, whereby every one of our actions will influence the entire sustainability journey downstream. So with that, we work closely with the industry, okay, to be able to, solve some of these problem statements that we are hearing. Problem statement number one, there's a lack of data at the asset level. This could be a plantation, this could be a factory, this could be a fleet, okay, this could be a building, right? There is a lack of data at the fundamental asset level, okay, for us as a financial institution, for example, or an investor, for example, to, recognize or reconcile the efforts of the company against its subsidiary assets, okay? The second problem statement is that, we want to have data, not just ratings. Okay, so ratings are a useful tool, but actually what would be really useful is the underlying data of these different companies, okay, or different assets, okay, underneath the ratings. Okay, and of course, thirdly, okay, a lot of data is missing in APAC, okay, where we are today, right? The climate change, okay, the war against climate change will be fought and won in Asia. That's what GFAN said, it's COP27, okay, and that's where, okay, we all need to double down on efforts where we are now. Okay, to be able to try to cover this. And so that's how we have continued, okay, in the last 1 year to focus on our efforts. Okay, firstly, we continue to grow our data coverage. We want to present the underlying data and present solutions that would be using this underlying data for users of the data. And thirdly, we want to partner in APAC. Okay, so we partner with everyone. We want to partner with everyone here. That includes your government agencies. Okay, in Singapore, we partner with a few. Okay, that includes NGOs. Okay, we want to partner with the United Nations Global Compact networks. Okay, we want to partner with trade associations. Okay, there are several trade associations that want to be able to empower their members. Okay, and basically any other kind of like organization in this sustainability journey. So with that, let's look at the first thing that we are focused on, data. So at this moment, right, because now we are at version 2.0, we have already made quite a bit of progress, whereby, firstly, just a simple snapshot. And by the way, this number changes every week. So if you see me next week, the number will be changed already. All right, as of today, we have verified, okay, we have 200,000 companies' data, of which 70,000 of them are fully verified with corporate data overlay. So what does this mean? Okay, 70,000 of these companies, with a breakdown here, okay, they have the corporate data, which includes the corporate registration number, their address, the revenue size, the number of employees, the industry sector, and therefore classifying them to large enterprise or SME, all already overlaid into their sustainability data that we captured. So this means that this information could be immediately actionable against the rest of the other data that you already know about the company. So 70 over 1,000 companies, of which you could see the breakdown, 55,000 SMEs, interestingly, and 25,000 in ASEAN. Okay, so if I had to highlight some of it, in Asia, we have 40,000 companies, okay, and a larger proportion of SMEs. Therefore, solving or addressing the direct problem statement of the lack of data, especially mid-cap, small-cap in APAC. And this data coverage, again, we grow it every day, all right? So, right now, this data coverage includes 470,000 ESG certificates. Certificates that we often hear are the bare minimum or the entry barrier for certain things like green finance, right? If you want to have a green finance or green bond, a third-party industry recognized, standard certificate is often the minimum thing that you need to have. So these 470,000 certificates would be interesting, for the users of our platform. They cover several certification bodies from different industries, from different sectors. And this also includes from different countries, not just in Singapore. So in Singapore, we work with several industry certification registries like the BCA, the SEC, we see also, and also several global bodies like RSPO, etc. So these are the various kind of cross-industry, cross-sector, and cross-country registries that we have already aggregated in the platform. We also have 39,000 credentials. So credentials are a loose term to cover all the memberships, targets, or scores that we have aggregated. For example, CTP scores. For example, SBTi targets, or memberships of a sustainability alliance like BCI, for example. And of course, we also aggregated 5 million sustainability disclosure data points, predominantly coming from initially sustainability reports. So in our platform today, we have more than 5,000 sustainability reports, and inside the reports, we have several data points for GRI matrices, SASB matrices, and TCFD disclosures. So these are also aggregated into our platform. And besides that, we have also started to provide corporate self-disclosure assessments, right? So this could be SME or corporate self-assessments. We partnered with the UNSCAP. We have also now created a digital link with GCNS, and ERQ for the Singapore questionnaire. Besides that, we also work with third-party carbon calculators who calculate footprint at the product level, or at the company level, or at the spending level. So these are the various data points that we aggregated into our platform to grow, the data coverage every single day. And having all this data, is important, but more importantly, as we mentioned just now earlier, is to aggregate them into a single profile, right? Because what's the name of our platform again? It's ESGpedia, right? So ESGpedia sounds like what? Sounds like Wikipedia. So many of you might be famous one day to have your own Wikipedia page, right? Everything good about you, everything that you have done is inside one single page. Or about your company, same thing. For companies, they have their Wikipedia page, right? So for ESGpedia, what we want to present is a corporate profile of their ESG activities. So this could, of course, include, their certificates, their credentials, their sustainability data points, their scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 emissions and intensity, and any of these disclosure data points that they have already submitted somewhere. So that's what we have done. 73,000 companies with a single profile in our platform, with all these 5 million data points aggregated into one view, so that this could now be usable. Right? So that if you are now trying to understand the profile of a company, you are able to see it in one view, and this also includes parent-child mapping. Right? So this is the progress that we made over the last 1 year. To be able to put all of this together, we do really want to become a Wikipedia for ESG. Where you only need one resource to be able to do certain things, where therefore we present the underlying data to create solutions. Right? So the solutions could be for various reasons, right? You could be a company looking to look at your suppliers. You could be a financial institution, whereby you could be an investing company, like investment fund manager, for example, trying to invest money. Or you could be a financier trying to provide a loan for sustainability financing. So with that, we created solutions. And as Zhaoqi mentioned just now, we are going beyond just providing data. We're actually trying to provide solutions that could be immediately used. For example, the first thing that we are launching already is the Green Credentials Checker. right? So, today as a person, as an individual, if I'm going to get a housing loan or apply for a credit card, the bank will do a credit bureau search on me, right? Have I been bankrupt before? Have I been sued, etc. So that's a so-called KYC check or AML check or a credit check, right? So soon, okay, or rather now, we can already provide a green credentials check, whereby if you're pinging a company's name, okay, because we already aggregated the profile into a company's profile, right? So if you ping a company's name, okay, we will therefore be able to see the information about the company when it comes to ESG, right? So we do see the potential of solutionizing this and making it available for users. Again, you could be a financial institution, you could be a corporate, or you could even be just doing this for academic reasons. Okay, whatever the reason it might be, okay, we want to be able to provide a green credentials checker at the entity level. That allows us to create more solutions. For example, if you are looking at supplier monitoring, now this would be more for corporates, okay, whereby, okay, if you are looking at supply chain, there could be certain standards that you are looking for specifically. So not just your, any credentials that we dump it inside, but maybe something very specific like your industry cert, okay, or your emissions. Okay, so that's something that we could customize, okay? And also thirdly, conditional screening, okay? If you want to create a list, okay, whatever the reason might be. So for example, if I'm an investment manager, I wanted to invest in the most green buildings, right? In buildings that are the most green, right? So I want to be able to create a list of buildings that are above a certain criteria, meaning maybe it's above a certain BCA score, or LEED score if it's an international building, and maybe above a certain, below a certain carbon intensity number, right? So these are the various conditions that I could create as a portfolio. And this portfolio is simply a list of companies that I could just keep, okay, getting notified on, right? And fourthly, benchmarking. So I want to be able to know the companies that I'm working with, which percentile are they in? And fifth, taxonomy framework analysis. Okay, this is something that's coming up, okay, in our platform, coming soon. Okay, but that effectively allows the framework comfortability, okay, and as the taxonomy starts to be implemented in the next 2 years, taxonomy analysis between the Singapore taxonomy and ASEAN taxonomy, between the Singapore taxonomy and CGT, Common Ground taxonomy, EU and China, for example, right? So these are the various ways that this data can now be used meaningfully. And all of it could be serviced via API, SFTP, or via our UI. Okay, and with data privacy preserved, meaning ultimately data providers would still have total ownership of data, which we'll see in our demo shortly. Okay, so thirdly, okay, we partner with ecosystem partners, in APAC. We want to expand, okay, our coverage and also deliver synergies. Okay, so as an example, okay, so quite excitingly, last week I was in Bangkok with some members of the team. Okay, we were actually in the ESCAP UN building in Bangkok. Okay, so we have partnered with the ESCAP. Specifically, we have partnered with the ESCAP Sustainable Business Network. Okay, the short form is ESBN, right? ESCAP Sustainable Business Network. ESCAP stands for Economic Social Commission for Asia and Pacific. Okay, so we have partnered with them in the APAC Green Deal. So the ESBN has really launched an APAC Green Deal last year, okay, in October last year. And for the last 6 months, they've been working with us, to design and deliver a digital self-assessment platform. And the Green Deal is about, sustainability for businesses. And just as the same thing that I mentioned in the beginning, when it comes to businesses, this is always an interlinked value chain. You have the SMEs selling to the large corps, financed by the financial institutions. Right? So how do we bring this all together? How do we enable the upstream SMEs? Noting that SMEs do not have the know-how, usually, to fill up, okay, the standard reporting requirements of large corporates in sustainability. So that's the problem statement, okay, to digitalize the program, okay, and provide a digital platform to help these SMEs. And so with happiness, we launched this digital self-assessment platform to support their program last week. Okay, and I'd like to show you a 3-minute video, okay, which will actually walk through the platform. Okay, yeah. So that was the video. Okay, so I've watched it about 100 times now, so the music is keep repeating in my head. Yeah, so I'm gonna hopefully let you always remember the music too. All right. So anyway, the platform is now live. It's a digital self-assessment platform, as you saw, and just wanted to re-emphasize on a few points of the platform. Okay, which is firstly the the digitalization of this program actually allows for various benefits for the SMEs. As an example, the emission factors are now built into the platform, okay, and also localized to different countries. Okay, so because the SCAP covers several countries, in Asia Pacific. Okay, so these countries' emission factors are automatically produced. Okay, and it also covers the factories or the assets, okay, of different countries that a company may own. Okay, so that's the good value over there, good value proposition that we have added to the platform. Secondly, of course, guidance are provided at every single part of the platform, okay, where every single piece of data that is required to be filled in has a very clear explanation of where this data point could be acquired. Okay, and besides that, okay, the key outcome is that the companies, okay, could choose to amplify their results on ESGpedia. Okay, because here the SCAP is actually going to be providing green, silver, and gold badges. Right, the green badge is available the moment you sign up. Okay, with a complete company registration number. Okay, the silver badge is when you complete 1 year of submitting data, and the gold badge is when you are able to demonstrate improvement in the second year. In other words, 2 years of data. All right, so that's where the companies will ultimately still have the right to publish this or keep it private. And if they choose to publish this, the value is, of course, they will now be sharing it to the ESGpedia network, which will include several of, hopefully, your clients or your investors or your bank financiers. Okay, so that's what we want to be able to bring together in a single platform. Okay, so this is the platform link. Okay, please do scan our QR code. I'm just going to pause here for a moment. Yeah, I will not move until I see everyone's phone. Just joking. Let's just give 10 seconds for everyone to scan the QR code. So it is a link to be able to sign up. Okay, again, when we say sign up today to attain your badge, I'm not kidding. The moment you finish the registration, okay, you will be able to get a green badge. But of course, ESBN or SCAP will have to approve it. All right, so what are they looking for? They are looking for simple or real corporate information. All right, so signing up is for organization, is for companies. These are for companies. Okay, you could fill in your, you're going to be needing your registration number, your registration address, but you do not need all of it today. Right, you could just sign up and verify your email address and fill up the information later. Okay, yeah. So that's where the moment that you complete the corporate sign up, okay, ESBN will verify it, okay, and they will be able to provide you a green badge in usually 2 or 3 weeks' time, okay, because we do it on a weekly basis, okay. So that's one badge, that we are already supporting, which is the ESBN Green Deal, Green, Silver, or Gold. I'm also quite happy to shout out that, today we also have the low carbon SG logo, okay, directly integrating with us. Okay, in the sense that, okay, we have formed a direct link with CPLC, okay, and GCNS. Okay, so GCNS is actually in the room. Shout out to Esther at the back and her team, Terence and Chris. All right, so Global Compact, okay, GCNS, okay, they are of course, okay, leading CPLC, which is a initiative that's supported by the NEA and Enterprise SG in Singapore. Okay, so this program, of course, has a similar concept in the sense that we have the similar alignment of principles to be able to make it easier for SMEs or companies in general to get started with decarbonization. Okay, so there is a very sophisticated workshop that is conducted by the GCNS, okay, at very good, okay, value for all the companies to attend. And if you are able to achieve the low carbon SG logo through the program, we will also be directly connected, okay, with the platform to be able to show that into your profile, okay? So that's also available. So now you can have a few badges, not just one, okay? So hopefully this will be able to encourage, as mentioned, the entire supply chain and value chain, SMEs to get started, corporates to be able to, manage the supply chain and make the entire APAC region more well built, for exporting to the rest of the world. Okay, later on, moving on to the next part soon, the second part of the session will be sharing of certain use cases by our valued partners. All right, so we have a few valued partners here today. We have very kindly agreed to come and share with us, everybody, about what they are doing in sustainability, particularly with the use of data. Right, so we have Teo Garments, who are going to be sharing with us about using the platform for their factories around Asia. Okay, we are going to have Maxeon talk about supplier monitoring, especially using ISO standards or industry standard certificates. Okay, we have MUFG kindly sharing about green finance for the real estate sector. Okay, and you'll be talking more about data-driven sustainability. Okay, so I'm really looking forward to also learning and understanding from them about their experiences in using data and technology. Okay, and hopefully that also creates some reference points for everyone here. Now, at STACS, we continue to learn. Okay, we have a team here today. All of us will be wearing this green and blue, lanyard. Okay, so it's easily recognizable. I think we have like 20 people here. Yeah. So, as mentioned, ESGpedia is now 1 year old. Okay, in the sense that we launched this last year. Okay, we also have many more years that we are looking forward to. Okay, and basically the last thing that I wanted to share is that we will be going ahead continuously with the following activities, which is firstly, to continue deepening our capabilities in data and AI. We want to be able to support, AI scraping of data from documents. We want to support better analytics. Number two, we want to continue to support more corporate programs. All right, the programs like GCNS or SCAP ESBN would be useful, but we want to be able to have more, because there are many different nuances or industry requirements for different programs. Thirdly, we are going to be future-proofing as taxonomy and regulations evolve. And fourthly, we will be enhancing the partnerships that we have in our ecosystem. Because as I stated in the beginning, we need to go further and faster together. Okay, and as I'd like to end with a quote to share with everyone, in 2015 at the COP21 in Paris, where the Paris Agreement was developed, President Obama made a speech at the beginning, and where he stated, we are the first generation to feel the effects of climate change, and the last generation who could do something about it. So this is something that we have to do together collectively, and we look forward to working with the ecosystem on. Okay, hopefully we'll be able to see you again in November during our semi-annual showcase. Okay, and many cheers to us because it's our birthday again. So happy birthday to STACS and ESGpedia. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben, for the great update. So I think driving back to the theme of data-driven sustainability, I think we can all agree that more and granular data is definitely integral and essential, in getting corporates embarked on their sustainability journey. And of course, hopefully with such digitalized self-assessment tools, we can encourage more corporates to actually embark on sustainability data collection as well. And of course, I believe some of you might have many questions, for Ben as well. So can I actually invite Ben back up to the stage as well for the Q&A segment? Yeah. So we will be having around 10 minutes Q&A segment. After each speaker's presentation, feel free to raise your hand, and the mic will be presented to you. Or you can also actually hop onto the website over here, slido.com, with the code over there to actually fill up your questions as well. Yeah. So I think we have our first question from Slido. So Ben, ESGpedia is actually based on companies' disclosure, and companies may choose to disclose the good and less of the bad, which is usually might be their supply chain of the third parties. So in this aspect, how will you manage this?
Yep. I think the logical answer is that, without ESGpedia, they would also be able to do the same, right? Without ESGpedia, they may be disclosing only the good, or and leaving out the bad. Right? So how are we going to manage this? Okay, so I think the value of technology or data platform is to try to bring transparency. So anything that is self-disclosed, we have to label them as self-disclosed, right? That's not yet verified, in other words. What I'm trying to say is that it's not yet verified. And whatever that's verified, we will have to therefore label them as verified. Okay, so, and that's where our partnerships with the ecosystem, which will definitely include assurance bodies, will come in handy. So we are partnering with several assurance bodies, some of them are in the room today, okay, whereby they would be providing a third-party service to be able to assure users, if they needed to, okay, that this data has been verified externally. Yeah.
Right. Thank you, Ben. So I think before I move on to the next question, anyone on the floor has a urgent question would you like to ask now? Right. Then maybe we can move on to the next question first. So how do you actually encourage SMEs to participate and record their data on this platform? I mean, because to these SMEs, definitely they are looking at whether there are any incentives actually offered to them, in filling up their data.
Exactly. So it's important to work in an ecosystem whereby the incentive mechanism driven firstly by corporates, secondly by the financial sector, right? So increasingly we are starting to see financial sector institutions, basically your investment managers or your banks, able to provide an award, incentive for these green companies. And increasingly, we're also starting to see corporates requiring their suppliers to at least be a minimum level of greenness. Otherwise, they wouldn't even, they would suffer when it comes to the, tenders or RFPs. Okay, so that's where, besides tech, we want to build up this ecosystem where effectively it forms something like a conducive marketplace for incentive mechanism. Of course, badges like the low carbon SG logo or the ESBN badges would be helpful to evidence that as a third-party program.
Thank you, Ben. All right, to the next question. Can you share some of your ecosystem partners, that can actually provide a more comprehensive solution or a next step, such as training and calculating the emissions as well?
At least 10 of them, and I don't want to name them one by one. It would not be fair if I miss out anyone. And many of them are in the room. So I will highly encourage you to be networking after the session. We scheduled for the sessions to end at 6 and networking to end at 7. Okay, please do go around, talk to everybody in the room. There are several such partners in the room today. We also keep an updated list in our website. So there will be a more comprehensive one. Yep.
Thank you. And of course, next question. So I mean, to some of these SMEs, they are quite new to the sustainability space. So how do you actually provide guidance for them to actually gather the required data and to complete the questionnaire itself?
Absolutely. So technology is one way. So digitalizing the requirements of sustainability. So, for me, I see sustainability as a journey, right? I mean, as a company perspective. So it's a journey and it's definitely shorter than schooling, right? We all spend 20 years in school, right? So from primary school, okay, sustainability for primary school, to me, is getting started with simple understanding of your sector, for example, of your emissions. And that's where some programs like the ESBN could help. All right. Then when it comes to secondary school, you need to be able to elevate your understanding. You need to be able to go a little bit deeper. You need to be able to have, more reports done, okay, based on certain standards and frameworks. Okay, that could be some of our other partners. Okay, for example, CDP or whatever, or that's maybe more a college level where there's a third party, scoring created. Okay, so throughout this journey, tech can help to digitalize the requirements. Okay, tech can help to calculate your emissions. Tech can help to give you your emission factor according to the country you're in. Okay, so that's how we want to be able to help, the SMEs. When it comes to training, I'll just talk about training anyway. So many of our partners will also provide training, support. As mentioned, GCNS does offer the training programs and curriculum. Many of our partners do the same. We would also do the same from an ecosystem perspective. And also, again, just to highlight that we will also be heavily involved in several activities. In fact, we have a sustainability workshop next Wednesday. Yeah, and so that's something that we look forward to continue recurringly provide, for our ecosystem.
Thank you. And of course, I think on the topic of sustainability disclosures, of course, we have been seeing how greenwashing could be actually getting more and more prevalent. So how is STACS actually looking or even addressing this issue?
Greenwashing is an issue. The extreme opposite, which is greenwashing, is also an issue. So we do need to be able to strike a balance where data is provided, okay, in a digital way that is transparent and is really providing users the entire breadth in terms of coverage. Okay, so we want to be able to, therefore, by having more data being transparently presented, it will disincentivize greenwashing. Okay, you actually educate users, it might actually be able to allow the companies to understand that there are certain things that they might not have considered when they are able to see all the data in one place, right? Okay, but at the same time, we also do not want a situation where everybody's scared of doing any form of reporting. Okay, and that's where we want to provide a digital platform with verification to allow companies to still publish their profiles, instead of being quiet. Yeah.
Thank you. And I think maybe the last few questions from Slido. Given that right now there are so many different platforms or players out there, in the ESG space. So what actually differentiates ESGpedia, with similar platforms? And of course, what actually makes STACS, most influential?
That wasn't the objective, to be the most influential. We definitely didn't want to be the best or the biggest or the baddest platform, right? So, somebody said the financial sector is consisting of the, there's a movie called The Good, Bad, and the Ugly. And the financial sector is full of people who are evil and naive and greedy, right? So, but obviously, we are not trying to be the biggest or baddest. We are not trying to be evil or the, most successful. Okay, I think we play a certain role in the value chain. Right, our role in the value chain is that we are a connector, and that's what ESGpedia stands for. Right, we partner with solutions, and we are not one. Right, to pointedly bring up, we are not a decarbonization solution. If you're looking for one, we can't help you make your energy more efficient. We can't install light bulbs for you. I can't even do that for myself. Right, so we are not a decarbonization solution. Okay, we are not your solar producers, but we would try to be a connector. Of data, of solutions, of providers, and therefore I think our role in the value chain is very clear. We are not trying to be most influential. Our differentiation factor is that we just simply are a platform. Kind of similar to our partners AWS, right? AWS house several solutions. We do want to be able to do so in a different way, of course, for ESG. Yeah.
Thank you. All right. Second last question. I think with the ESBN assessment, of course, we will be encouraging SMEs, to move towards sustainability. However, what is your view actually towards making such disclosures mandatory, or actually getting regulations making it mandatory?
I mean, of course, mathematically, when there are sustainability requirements, therefore there will be more sustainability reporting. Right? That's mathematics. So I think what we are doing is to prepare for that, because we know those regulations are coming, either directly or indirectly. Indirectly would be, what it is today, whereby the supply chains are getting regulated, the large corps are getting regulated, and therefore indirectly the SMEs are, having to report. Directly would be, where all companies have to report something, right? So this future is coming anyway. Our role is to enable the companies before that happens. Right, so what I mentioned about having sustainability reporting, or companies to get started with primary school and secondary school of sustainability reporting, it actually sets them up for that future. It also allows them to be able to report one time, have data calculated one time, and get ready for the future. So I think that's what us, when I say us, again, is everybody, that is connected on ESGpedia would be trying to collectively provide.
All right, and then last question from the Slido. So I think it's a combination of a previous question just now as well. So will ESGpedia include adverse news or greenwashing news on the company? And also on the data, how often is the data actually updated?
So data is updated as soon as we get an update. So we do have a lot of different data feeds or sources, right? So many of them are working closely with us to provide a direct feed or direct file transfer. And so every time we get an update, we will update it accordingly, which is why I also mentioned that our numbers will change by the time we meet next week again. When it comes to adverse news, I mean, we are always looking at several solutions. Adverse news could be one of them. Climate risk could be one of them. What I mentioned are the solutions in the pipeline, but we are also exploring several other possible things that we can add into the platform. Having said that, we do have a clear pipeline of what we want to achieve in the next 3 months, right? So life in a company like us is fairly fast-paced. So our timeline is actually 3 months. In terms of the pipeline. And anything beyond that, we could start considering it today. Yep.
Thank you, Ben. So I think we're going to close off this Q&A segment for now. But if you have any further questions, feel free to approach Ben in the networking later as well. Thank you, Ben. All right. I would like to now move on to the next speaker. So our next speaker is actually Ms. Tan Song Qing. She's the Compliance and Sustainability Executive at Teo Garments. So she'll be giving us an introduction of Teo Garments and their sustainability efforts, and actually and speak more about how Teo Garments will be spearheading the ESBN Green Deal assessment actually for the textile and fashion sector. Ms. Tan, please.
Hi, thank you, Ben and Ben. I am Zhaoqi from Teo Garments. You can just call me SQ. So we have actually been in touch with a few financial institutes and also with STACS to know more about ESGpedia and how it can benefit Teo Garments. So just to give you an overview of Teo Garments aim to be an Asian partner of choice that is reliable, responsible, and reputable for our buyers. So in order to do so, because we produce garments, okay? So what we are trying to do is to have a one-stop service for our buyers, for our customers. And in order to do so, we are looking at supply chain. We look into a supply chain on a very daily basis, where we look at 3D sampling, we look into QA, QC inspections and things like that, and also into factory compliance. So we do have a lot of factories overseas. We do have factories in China, Cambodia, and now we are slowly expanding into the Vietnam market. And we also do have offices in Hong Kong and also in India that is helping us in the expansion. So when we talk about the factories that we have in these countries, we are also looking into parent-children mapping, which Ben has actually mentioned previously, on how we have a better communication with the factories. So we do work with a lot of retailers, of big brands like Ralph Lauren. We work with Carter's and also some other brands out there that they are really looking into sustainability, and they are really driving us into, working into having more organic cotton materials and more recycled materials. We are also looking into other factory certificates, such as Better Work, REP, and also ISO 9001, which ESGpedia will be able to help us when we are looking at parent-children mapping, and also when we are looking into the different types of factory compliances. Also, we are looking into the different types of standards out there. We are looking at GOTS, which is organic cotton. We are also looking into recycled standards, and also BCI, which is for better cotton. So in order for us to have a better understanding of where we are standing and where our factories are standing, ESGpedia is able to help us a lot, because from there we can have an overview of what factory has what type of information and what type of certificates that they have. So it's a very efficient way that I can work together with my facilities. And also, just coincidentally, we just received our low carbon SG logo just yesterday, so I am able to update my slides today. Yeah, we just got our diamond logo, and I'm really pleased to know that ESGpedia, STACS, they are working together with low carbon SG, so that we can have a more streamlined place, a platform that we can all put in our data and everything like that, so that it's a more comprehensive, a more cohesive place that we can update our carbon emissions, and to really state to the world that Teo Garments, we are doing things like that. These are all our sustainability initiatives that we are doing at the moment. Yeah. So I think ESGpedia would be a very helpful platform for Teo Garments, because it can help us with a lot of the reporting, a lot of the compliance standards that we have, and also on carbon emission. Yeah. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Zhang. Yep. So I think we can all agree, that actually in every sector, we need to have like a leader, like Teo Garments, to actually spearhead such sustainability data collection, aggregation, in each sector. And of course, given that the textile and fashion sector constitutes 10% of global emissions, this is of course definitely one of the biggest sectors, to look towards to decarbonizing. Yep. And of course, if I can invite Zhang up back for the Q&A, I think perhaps maybe some of you guys might have some questions for her as well. Yep, Zhang, please. perhaps maybe I can kickstart as a personal question on my own. So what are some of the requirements, from your end buyers, like you mentioned, Ralph Lauren or Carter's, in terms of them getting your sustainability data? Could it be certificates? Could it be granular data, etc.?
Well, they do demand several different types of data. So one of it will be under HIC. For Ralph Lauren, they are really looking into HIC. So where we put in all our carbon emissions for all of the different factories. And under HIC, we do have data that is for environment, that is for electricity, that is for, even for social and things like that. So there is really, really a lot of information to key in that can be quite taxing at some time. In terms of other compliance standards, or I would say industry standards that you mentioned, it's really more to Ocotex, more towards organic cotton and things like that. Yeah.
Right, thank you. And I think, of course, when we converse with the SMEs as well, we get to learn what are the relevant certificates, data points, for each sector. As we know, each sector has their own sector-specific certificates as well. Yep. And of course, I think as a leading SME, in the textile and fashion sector for sustainability, what are some guidance you would give, for SMEs who are looking towards starting, their sustainability journey, whether it's disclosures, whether it's certificates, etc.
Well, I am a very good person to answer this question because I just joined Teo Garments about a year plus, going to 2 years. And when I first joined Teo Garments, they didn't really do anything much about sustainability in our Singapore office. So we didn't do low carbon SG, we didn't, start on carbon measurements or things like that. So what triggered us was, of course, external factors like, our customers wanting us to key in data and to be more sustainable. So from there, we really had to learn and go to seminars to learn about sustainability, what sustainability is, how to measure carbon under Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3. And then from there, that's how we started with low carbon SG first. And of course, now looking at ESGpedia, I really think that, ESGpedia is very easy to fill in because the questions are really very straight to the point. And it's really not data that you just pull from the sky or anything. It's really based on, your electricity bills. How much electricity are you consuming over the past few months or the past year? And then for water, it will be your water bills. So it's all data that can be verified. It's all data that you collect from other people to consolidate and to present it. So ESGpedia is, I would say, a platform for us to present our data in a way that is easy for others to understand. And it's a way that, when people look at the data on ESGpedia, they know what we are, presenting about.
Thank you. And of course, I think when we focus on the data collection, similar to Teo Garments, I believe many businesses out there would have facilities, offshore, onshore as well. So do you actually, when going through the data collection, is there a difficulty actually collecting data or facilities data, maybe from the factories, in Cambodia, in Vietnam, in China, etc.?
Well, it really depends on the complexity of, the business model. So first, before you collect any data, you really need to set out where is the boundaries that you have, and you have to justify the boundaries if it's of a reasonable context, and then from there on you can start to collect your data. So I think it's not that difficult to collect data. It's just on how you set up your boundaries. And then once you start your engine, you get that momentum, it's actually quite easy to move forward already. So like what Ben has mentioned just now, sustainability is a journey. And he mentioned about studying, from primary school to secondary school onwards. For me, sustainability, it is a journey, but instead of, using primary school and secondary school, I would rather treat it as, how am I going to move down this journey? Do I start out as a baby that I crawl? Or afterwards, if I have enough knowledge, can I build a car on my own so that I can expedite my sustainability journey? Yeah.
Thank you. So now that, Teo Garments, you have done up your disclosures, you've gotten certain certifications, what will actually be your next step, as a sustainable SME? Are you looking towards certain sector-specific guidelines, any further targets, etc.?
Yes, actually, we are now moving towards, something that is quite ambitious for SME. We are now moving towards doing up our own sustainability reporting with GRI standards. So we are learning how to go about doing our sustainability report with, the help of a professional consultant that can help us to do up a better, a more professional standard under GRI. And at the same time, me being in Teo Garments, I would be able to learn more about sustainability and how to report it further.
Thank you. And last question. So I believe Teo Garments is a member of the Singapore Fashion Council, the trade association for textile and fashion in Singapore. So what role actually do you feel that the trade associations, should actually play in helping fellow SMEs like yourselves, develop or start their sustainability strategy?
Well, yes, we are in the trade associations. We are a leading member in the Singapore Fashion Council. And I believe that Teo Garments play a very important role in this because as everybody know, being in the fashion industry or the textile industry, fast fashion is not something that is desirable for sustainability. So we have been talking to a few other companies. We have been, have some dealing with the others. And it really is, because sustainability is very wide. We are looking into different ways that we can help other companies and, to have a leverage on how they can help us as well. So it is more towards a win-win situation that we can, help in this sustainable journey. Yeah, we actually went on to this other challenge called the Sustainability Open Innovation Challenge, where we post, questions to our problem statements to the public, where they can come up with ideas on how to help us with our problem statement in regards to sustainability. So one of it was us posing a question on the reduction of textile waste, because we do have a lot of textile scraps in the factories itself. So instead of recycling it, instead of using it as mattress stuffings, how can we further reduce the textile waste or to eliminate textile waste so that, we don't end up burning them or to end them up in the landfills. So these are some of the challenges, these are some of the initiatives that Teo Garments is doing.
All right, thank you, Zhaoqi. Unfortunately, due to time constraint, we'll be just closing the Q&A segment here. But do feel free to approach her, during the networking if you have further questions, And of course, hopefully you're excited to see how Teo Garments will be leading the textile and fashion sector. And of course, there are many other sectors out there, and hopefully, we'll see more and more leading companies like Teo Garments as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Up next, I'm actually delighted to invite Ms. Stella Chan, Global ESG Lead at Maxeon Solar Technologies on stage. She'll be showcasing the latest developments in our partnership since October last year, and actually also how ESGpedia today is helping corporates like Maxeon manage their supply chain sustainability and ensuring that suppliers are ISO compliant. Ms. Chan, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Ben and STACS, for inviting Maxeon as well to showcase our solutions. Okay. So the agenda for today is we'll be sharing on who we are, our sustainability framework, milestones, business challenge, and ESGpedia solutions that we're working with STACS since last year. Just a brief introduction. Maxeon is a leader in global solar innovations, and we are Tier 1 global solar cell and panel manufacturer. So we have manufacturing locations in Mexico, Philippines, Malaysia, and JV in China. And we are headquartered in Singapore, where our R&D is based, as well as in US, where we have our R&D as well. And Maxeon is listed in Nasdaq, but is headquartered in Singapore. Maxeon actually established our ESG governance and policies, and this is how our governance looks like. Our global ESG team is located in Singapore and is overseen by our Chief Legal Officer, the Global ESG Executive Leader. And this is our non-gov, Nominating and Corporate Governance Committee provides oversight to all our ESG initiatives. Our main focus is on environmental stewardship, labor practices, as well as modern slavery and conflict minerals. We do report voluntarily on our website as well, so you can actually go down to Maxeon's website to look at all our policies and statements. This is our sustainability framework. Our values is we push the boundaries, hold ourselves to higher standards, and we thrive together. We base it on 3 key pillars, which is environmental, social, and governance. And given that we also reviewed our material topics, we selected these 4 that are most aligned to our business operations. And these are the 4 UN SDG goals that our material topics are most aligned to as well. So let me just share our sustainability milestones over the years. So Maxeon is actually a spin-off from SunPower in 2020. And we established our new ESG team in 2020. And followed by, we joined the UN Global Compact in the same year as well. So subsequently, in 2021, we released our inaugural sustainability report, followed by our first conflict minerals reporting since post-spin-off, and green finance reporting. And we also set long-term ESG targets in 2021. So since last year, we have won we are the winner for the best sustainability report for human rights in silver. And we published our modern slavery statement, which aligns with Australia, California, and UK reporting standards. This is a voluntary reporting. It is followed by the energy payback time assessment that we did last year as well. And in the second half, we launched our green bond framework, achieved cradle to cradle silver. We launched Maxeon Gifts, which is a CSR initiative where we get a platform for employees to nominate solar panels donations. So we work with organizations to donate panels to communities, needies, NPOs. So we are working with a lot of schools on this as well. And we welcome organizations that are keen to work on these initiatives to work with us. And end of last year, we also collaborated with ESGpedia for a supplier sustainability monitoring, which we discovered some of our gaps, and ESGpedia actually helped us in their solutions. So this year, we are humbled to be named by Corporate Knights as a top 100 most sustainable companies in January. And we also joined CFO Coalition for the SDGs. And we also plan to actually disclose the TCFD framework voluntarily because we are listed in STACS, so it's not a mandatory requirement for the US yet. So we also plan to disclose our CDP. We are rated AA by MSCI, which is one of the top for the solar industry. And we just released Powering a Circular Economy Policy, which is a policy for recycling and beyond on our website. And to actually achieve that, we are embarking on a partnership with NTU Iran on upcycling of solar panels, and we plan to do a comprehensive life cycle assessments for solar panels as well. Lastly, we did launch the second phase of a Maxeon Gift this year, which is on volunteerism, where we encourage our employees to volunteer at least 1 day per year for CSR initiatives. So these are some of our ESG long-term goals that we have committed to. So this includes Cradle to Cradle certified silver by 2025, but we have already achieved it in advance, followed by improving our carbon positivity and energy payback time at 24% efficiency. So, and these are some of our energy intensity and all the environmental intensity targets that we meant to improve. These are some of our third-party product verification certifications that have achieved over the years as well, including the AA for MSCI, the first zero waste to landfill for Mexico facilities, a declare label for our panels, silver for our cradle to cradle, as well as in 2019 we won the PV Magazine Award. So these are kind of like the milestones that we are working on since 2020 2004, and in this year we are working on a new Gen 7 panels, which plan to provide higher efficiency for our panels as well. And moving beyond panels, Maxeon also plans to go into storage and services for our clients. Okay, so let me just share some of the Maxeon's current ESG requirements for suppliers. For Maxeon, we generally have policies for employees and contractors alike. This includes the Code of Business Ethics and Conducts, as well as the supplier sustainability guidelines that suppliers have to run through review as well as sign on during the onboarding. And we conduct live training almost annually. And this applies to the second tier, which is our suppliers as well. And lastly, for raw materials, we also commit as a matter of practice to comply with the most stringent laws and international standards. Apart from the policies, as we also engage an audit firm to audit our supply chain operations and working conditions. So these audited results are generally uploaded onto the STACS platform. So STACS is actually an online platform that ensure ethical and responsible sourcing. So once the supplier completes the pre-audit and audit, so the reports will be posted on STACS and it will be available to all registered members of STACS. While we are working on ESG for suppliers, we found that there are certain gaps that ESGpedia could help us to fill. So this is like one of the gaps that we found, and ESGpedia is able to help us with it. So the first one is for us, we require suppliers to be ISO compliant. So it has been a very manual process for us. So the current way of requesting is we get it from suppliers and manually, and it's kind of too time-consuming and inefficient. So what we need is a more efficient way to monitor the ISO certifications and the validity as well. So ESGpedia work with us to connect directly with the IAF search to verify and accredit the ISO certificates. So this helps us with the verification and monitoring. And eventually, we are able to view and monitor all the relevant ISO certificates for our suppliers on the platform itself. This actually helps us to streamline and make it more efficient for us to search and filter the ISO certificates based on the multiple factors. We have actually worked with ESGpedia and STACS since last year, so this is our first phase of the project. The first phase was more of a portfolio monitoring. So we uploaded the suppliers onto ESGpedia's platform, and they are able to help us with the suppliers assessment and comparison across selected metrics, and flag up changes in the suppliers' ESG performance, and to monitor the suppliers' ESG performance. So this is the second phase of the pilot that we are doing with ESGpedia, which is on the ISO certification mapping. So how it works is the certification bodies has shared, verified, and accredited ISO certificates with search, and it port it all over to the ESGpedia, and Maxeon is able to share this portfolio. It is able to review and check on this portfolio of the ISO certificates for viewing and monitoring. So this actually helps us a lot in terms of efficiency. This is a screenshot from the ESGpedia solution, where you are able to see like some of our suppliers on it, and an overview of the ISO certificates across the suppliers with assessment and comparisons. We are also able to search and filter for specific supplier by name, sector, certificate status, and expiry. We are also able to click on each certificate and view in-depth details on the ISO certificates. So with the system, and we kind of automate the search and the upload of the ISO certification, which reduce all the hassle of requesting it from the suppliers manually. So this help us to improve the efficiency in general for suppliers monitoring. And for more information, you can reach out to us at esg@maxeon.com, or you can look at go to our website for more ESG information as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Chan. So I think once again, from the use case, I think we can see that actually sustainability, is a journey. We have started working with Maxeon since last year, October. And, every day by day, every month, we are slowly beginning to understand, what are some relevant data points to the corporate itself. And of course, with this use case, we can actually help, corporates like Maxeon in terms of managing their supply chain sustainability. Yep. And if I can invite Ms. Chan back, for the Q&A portion. Yeah. So maybe just a question to kickstart off. So I think now that you have, used ISO certificates as a way to manage the supply chain sustainability, would the granular data, take for example the suppliers' scope 1 and 2 emissions, be something of a next step for Maxeon?
We are actually looking at more automation for our side because for ESGpedia is still a pilot. So we are looking at the next step of procuring more granular data from our supplier, and we are actually looking at different types of software as well. Yeah.
Okay. Yep, thank you. Yep, so with this supplier data, how does that actually help you in terms of the screening, actually, and in terms of the weightage that you will give to each data points, what do you actually use, in terms of your screening and the mitigating action itself?
For now, we are actually working with ESGpedia for more on the ISO certificates mapping. So apart from the ISO mapping itself, manually, we are also getting the other information, ESG information, including the energy, water, as well as waste data from our suppliers as well. But this is probably in the next phase. Yeah, yep. It's not automated yet, though.
Yep. So I think with your Maxeon's requirement of getting suppliers to be ISO compliant, is there some potential challenges actually for potential suppliers actually to be ISO certified?
Because when we're working with various suppliers, we do have like SMEs as well as listed companies. So I think for SMEs, they do have some limitations when they need to get ISO certifications. So we are working with suppliers, even for SMEs, to help them to get the certifications as well. Yeah.
So speaking on this ISO certification, I think some of the ISO certs include the 14,001, 9,001, 50,001.
Yeah.
So is there a particular reason why these particular ISO certs were chosen for the SMEs to obtain?
Our main focus is on because it's an integrated system. So when we go for integrated IMS, we request the ISO 9001, 14,001, as well as the safety cert as well. Yeah. So these are the three main ones when we request for the IMS.
Yeah. So I think in terms of these ISO certifications, is there certain measures, that you actually use, to let your suppliers know, how the steps needed to actually achieve this ISO certification?
We have live training. So we do conduct annual trainings for suppliers, and we help them step by step as well. If they do have any questions, they can reach out direct to our ESG team for that. So you have to work closely with suppliers. Yeah.
Thank you. And I think one of the next point is on whether how do you actually validate or verify the data that you are actually getting from your suppliers, whether is it certifications or any further data that you are actually getting, and in terms of the costs or the time, how will you manage that as well?
When we do pre-onboarding, we do get them to disclose we do get them to sign on the ethics and code of conduct, as well as the supplier sustainability form for that. And after that, we do conduct interviews ad hoc with suppliers on site as well, to make sure that some of the claims are verified. But of course, these are times when we discover that there are certain inaccuracies in what they submit.
All right. Yeah, I think the next question, perhaps I can take it, for STACS. No, so actually we are working with IEF Search as well as a third-party partner to actually retrieve the ISO certificates data into our platform. So this is just also one example of a partnership with an external data provider. Yep. And I think one last question, maybe for Ms. Chan. So it seems that Maxeon has so much exciting things going on, and a lot of significant milestones and efforts in your sustainability journey. So what would actually be the next steps that you are looking at?
We have actually started on the TCFD, which is climate risk disclosures. So it's more on qualitative. So the next steps we are looking at is more on quantitative disclosures, and we plan to disclose more of the quantitative data. And following that, of course, we are also looking at more decarbonization initiatives in order to achieve eventually a net zero as well. Yeah.
All right, thank you, Ms. Chan. Yeah, that'll be the end of the Q&A. So any further questions, please feel free to find her later on as well. Yep, our next speaker, I would actually like to invite Ms. Huishi, who's the Senior Vice President in Sustainable Business, Corporate Sustainability Office at UOB. She'll actually be sharing how UOB is driving growth sustainably with sustainable finance instruments and the role of better data and ESGpedia in actually enhancing trust in green or social loans, sustainability-linked loans, as well as transition finance products. Ms. Lee, please.
Thank you, Benjamin, and ESG and the STACS team for inviting UOB to this event, and congratulations on the launch of the collaboration with the UN ESCAP on your latest questionnaire. And I think this is extremely helpful in trying to build understanding, simplify ESG and sustainability, especially for the SME sector. So today, what I will try to do is to demystify some of the concepts around sustainability and how the finance sector is actually trying to think about them. So I will touch on two broad concepts on net zero. What's the concept of net zero when we talk about net zero in the finance sector and for the wider economy? And I will also talk about how the bank is actually viewing sustainability from our lenses, whether it's from risk management or whether it's from the purpose of commercialization. So if you think about it, when you hear about a lot of concepts on we are trying to decarbonize and we are trying to move towards net zero and the economy will need to go towards a low carbon economy. And I recall one of the questions earlier from the audience was around what exactly is low carbon emissions. So if I pull back and I draw on a bigger concept on exactly, when everyone talks about sustainability, climate change, and we need to decarbonize, what are we talking about? So if you think about the modern economy today, in the morning when we wake up, we will start to use electricity. We brush our teeth, the water needs to go through purification. That uses energy. You actually have breakfast, you turn on the electricity, you make a cup of coffee. That's like fossil fuels powered, or in the case of Singapore, natural gas powered. That's carbon emissions at the power plant that we as consumers don't see. And then you take the public transport. Public transport needs electricity. And in some other countries, maybe it's powered by other sources of fossil fuels. And then you come to the office, you turn on the air conditioning, you have the laptop, and then you start working and you travel, you make calls. All this are electricity, fossil fuels generated. So in essence, today, our modern economy is built on a fossil fuels generated economy. And that itself uses a lot of carbon. In fact, I think 50 gigatons of GHG emissions. I'm not sure whether this statistics is updated. I think we had it like 6 months ago and it might have grown. And when we talk about decarbonization, what we are talking about is you take this 50 gigatons of GHG, you turn it into zero. And you heard this term, net zero by 2050. So between now and 2050, we need to cut our carbon emissions from 50 gigatons to zero. And what does that mean? From a commercialization perspective, for a bank and for an SME like you, what this means is infrastructure needs to change. At the government level, they will invest in new technologies, new ways of generating electricity. They need to put in energy storage, put in solar plants, put in wind farms, and the way we actually construct our buildings needs to change because we use a lot of steel, still actually generates a lot of carbon emissions. So in essence, it's about a shift in the way we produce, consume, and making sure that every bit of it is actually low carbon. So when we talk about net zero, it means that the economy gradually needs to shift from the technologies today to the technologies of tomorrow. And if you think about what the finance sector is trying to do, we are actually trying to finance this transition. And this is just a screenshot of what you expect to see in terms of new technologies coming down the pipeline, and what are the things that needs to be phased out, and what are the things that needs to actually put in place. So I won't go into the details, but in essence, is to give you an understanding of the changes that needs to take place, the kind of policy drivers that needs to be in place, and the kind of understanding that organizations needs to have, and how that's going to impact their business model. And from the financial institution perspective, when we talk about managing climate risk, when we talk about having net zero targets and commitments, how are we actually looking at it? So there is the aspect of risk management, where you talk about stress testing, having environmental risk management framework. So if you have your relationship manager that calls you up and tells you that, hey, I need to understand A, B, C, D, don't be surprised, because it's part of the bank's environmental risk management process. And this is where, with ESGpedia, the information comes in useful, because banks can actually access the information on ESGpedia and use it for their risk management process. And on the net zero front, when we talk about providing sustainable financing, it also does mean that from the bank's perspective, we need to understand a client's sustainability credentials. How are they thinking about sustainability? How is it integrated into a company's capital investments, a company's business strategy, and how do you actually then structure and offer them a loan that supports their journey? And so this is actually, so when we talk about a net zero targets for a bank, what banks are really thinking about is their scope 3 carbon emissions. And just for just to actually make sure that the audience are on the same page, when we talk about carbon emissions, there are actually 3 types of carbon emissions. What we call scope 1 emissions, scope 2 emissions, and scope 3 emissions. Scope 1 emissions is actually emissions that you actually own on site. For example, if you have a company vehicle that uses petrol, that's your scope 1 emissions. Scope 2 emissions are emissions that actually takes place when you actually purchase electricity. So if you think about it, for a bank like UOB, scope 1 and scope 2 emissions are marginal compared with scope 3 emissions. For a bank like UOB, scope 3 emissions is our finance emissions, which when we lend every dollar, there's an emissions associated with it. And in very simplistic terms, when banks set net zero targets, they set to decline their emissions from today, say 100 to 0. So they are going to choose to finance activities that have lower carbon emissions in time to come. And this is just a screenshot of UOB's net zero targets, the sectors that are involved. And I believe a lot of other banks have also set similar targets. So at UOB, we have 4 different types of frameworks that covers different sectors. I won't go into the details, but the reason why we have done this is because we wanted to support companies that are embarking on their sustainability journey, and we wanted to be able to play an advisory role as well as to provide financing to some of their projects or some of their general corporate purpose use, because we know that they are actually embarking on that journey. And there are 3 different kinds of products that we offer within UOB, and what we have done is we actually have an API to ESGpedia, and what we then do is we literally CSI every company. What you have done, benchmark against the peers to try and understand what peers are doing and how you are doing, and we have a conversation with the client. We try and bring them along this journey. We recognize that this is not an easy journey, but this is a journey that I think SMEs and organizations, big or small, need to get going, because in future, financing, the license, the right to financing is as important as having your right sustainability strategy and ESG strategy in place. So I think if you want to find out more, feel free to come to me after after the session, I can put you in touch with our team, and then we can take it from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lee, for the presentation. No, I think it's very interesting to see, definitely sustainable financing is definitely, needed, in order to spur sustainable developments in corporates as well. Yep. And I think we move on to the Q&A segment. Yep. So I think so. Just the first question. So what is on your view actually on the decarbonization of fossil fuel sectors such as coal, oil, and how will you actually take finance emissions in consideration?
Wow, this is a very complicated question. So I think like a lot of financial institutions, we have started to ask for carbon emissions data. So as an organization, if you have not started to understand and calculate your carbon emissions, please go to, I think UNGC is here, right? And please go to STACS to find out more. Because what financial institutions want is really accurate data of GHG emissions. That way we can understand how carbon intensive a company is. That's the first step. And in terms of the fossil fuel sectors, we recognize that there is a need for this region to transition. The exact pace of transition is under debate. But I think suffice to say, in time to come, lending to these sectors will taper down. How fast it will taper down, I think will depend on the wider economy and the policies that are put in place.
Yep, thank you. So I think previously, you mentioned about the finance emissions as well. So internally, what is actually you'll be focusing on in terms of its own decarbonization as well?
I think we take it from a couple of lenses, right? Corporate sustainability, we have been carbon neutral since 2020. So we purchase RECs, meaning we use renewable energy. And from the finance emissions, I think I mentioned earlier, we have set targets across several sectors. And I think there might be more sectors to come. And then on the education and awareness and the outreach side, I think we were in an event yesterday together with UNGC and a couple of other partners to try and bring awareness and upskilling for the different players within the main economy. And obviously working with MAS and STACS, Project Greenprint, to try and bring some of these ecosystem solutions to fruition so that everyone can get the data that they need.
Thank you. So I think linking back to the data, so how would you actually, move on to the next step in terms of performing perhaps benchmarking, using the data gotten from STACS, whether is it emissions, whether is it intensity, etc.
I think that will depend, vary from sector to sector. I think a very fair sort of comment to say is it will be normalized because we want to be fair, whether you're a small company or a big company, that benchmarking will be normalized. So, and I do think that benchmarking will evolve from time to time, depending on the maturity of that particular sector.
Thank you. So I think the next question is more on the projects, that you are financing. So how does UOB actually ensure the science, behind the projects that you finance, whether is it, correct? Take for example, carbon capture, hydrogen, all some of the hot topics that we're hearing right now and are all very appealing on paper. But how do you actually, decide, internally whether this is the right direction you should be going towards in financing such projects?
So I think with sustainability, I think what my CSO always likes to say, right? 3 years in other spaces, 6 months in sustainability. This space evolves really fast. So it is important to keep an eye on what's evolving in this space. And when things comes to commercialization, because that then that's going to be a game changer. And when you dance close to the body floor, you get the first dip. So it is quite important to really keep pace, understand the developments, understand what countries are trying to adopt, so that you know what's to come.
Thank you. And of course, I think you're talking about the net zero plan. Net zero in 2050. Being 2050, it being in 27 years. And of course, some of us, might have been retired. Might have been in a different space or sector as well. So would you consider, I would say, re-evaluating the targets, in this aspect as well?
I think when we do net zero target, right? Financial institutions follow what we call a science-based pathway, and this science-based pathway is actually set by very credible organizations like IEA or IPCC, and they do actually review the pathways from time to time, taking into consideration a range of factors. So when IEA or IPCC or the provider of this reference pathway releases new pathway, we will then re-evaluate and then push forth with our targets. So it's not a static target, but that target that we have set is largely in line with market expectations today.
Yep, thank you. And I think another question, so I think recently, the MES came out with the FinZ program, Finance for Net Zero Action Plan. So I think in view of this, what would be the approach, going forward, taking into account the MES FinZ plan?
So I think we have an MES Zhaoqi here, right? Maybe he's in a better position to answer than me. Yeah. So I think MES has ambition to make Singapore into a sustainable finance hub, and I think it's an important aspiration because I think we have a duty to help our neighbors along this journey because we do have pretty high sustainability standards, but I think it also anchors good jobs for Singaporeans. And I think one of the interesting concepts that have come up is the concept of transition finance. How can we use Singapore's status as a finance hub to support this decarbonization and transition of this economy within the ASEAN region? And I think that concept is still being debated, and how it will actually be implemented. There's a lot of industry consultations and discussions, and it will be a very interesting space for a lot of our real economy players outside of the finance sector. For example, your Capitals and your GLCs, they will have significant interest because these are new infrastructure developments that could go out and invest in, and in turn anchor some of these consultancy studies within Singapore. It's a really, really interesting space.
Yep. So the last question, and to linking back to your answer, so in terms of transition financing, what are some challenges you are seeing right now, and also perhaps potentially seeing in the future as well?
So with transition finance, what the industry has been trying to work out is what exactly should the plan. We need a transition plan, right? When a company talks about transition, what are the components that we want to see within a transition plan, and what kind of pathways? When I say pathways, meaning when should they get to net zero? Today, I think there's a lot of discussion. Like Indonesia has a nationally determined contribution, a decarbonization timeline of 2060. Different ASEAN countries have different timelines. Singapore has 2050. So where is the endpoint, and what's an acceptable endpoint to avoid greenwashing? And that is under debate. And what are the components that we actually want to see within a transition plan? Do we need to see carbon emissions intensity year on year? Do we need to see CAPEX investment plans? What else do we want to see? So that concept of decarbonization, having a transition plan, and having a just transition plan that's unique to the region is under discussion.
All right, thank you, Ms. Lee. So with that, we will conclude the Q&A segment for this segment. Yep. Yep, and last but definitely not least, it's actually my pleasure to invite on the stage, Mr. Jonathan Newin, who is the Vice President at MUFG Bank. So MUFG will be sharing more about unlocking sustainable real estate, with green financing for the sector. Mr. Jonathan, please.
So before I start, I want to just thank Ben and his team as well for having us here and for having us last week in Bangkok as well. We're very grateful to your help in the last week, and we're really very proud to see how far you have come with what you do on ESBN. I do also recognize that it's 6 p.m. now, and I'm the only thing that's holding you back from all the beer behind. So I will make this very punchy and somewhat interesting as well. So we're happy to take any more questions later on over beer. So for today itself, I wanted to really talk a little bit more about our efforts on green financing in the real estate sector as well, and how we're working with ESGpedia on how we can accelerate this process itself. So before we go on to the deck itself, I wanted to just give a brief introduction to our team. So our team was started just over 2 years ago, and since then we have raised about $20 billion in green and social loans for different corporates around APAC as well. Last year itself, we were also number 2 on the league tables with regards to ESG loans across both green and social as well. Just a small plug for ourselves, we were also voted the best sustainable finance advisor. And one of the deals that we'll be talking a little bit more about is the work that we've been doing with phrases and how we can scale that up. So we just put a short mental bookmark there, and we'll come back to this later on. So for us, the first thing we looked at was when we look at decarbonizing global industries and what we do, the main things to look at is where would these come from. So for us, this made a lot of sense to start in the real estate sector. Why? The real estate sector at this point makes up almost 40% of global emissions, thus making it the single largest sector in which this could be attributed to. It also puts a lot of pressure for corporates and also upstream players to also think about decarbonizing that whole space as well in order to bring it down so that we can hit net zero by 2050. So this makes a lot of sense for us to start at this sector. Bring it closer to home. If we look at Singapore and what we're doing in Singapore right now, the whole 80-80-80 in 2030 would stand out. So taking this from the BCA master plan, by 2030, we're looking to get to 80% of our buildings to green. We're looking to get 80% of our new developments to be what they call SLE, super low energy, and also 80% energy efficiency improvement by 2030 as well. These are extremely ambitious goals, and given that we have only 7 years to achieve them, we will need a multi-pronged approach. And as you can see, BCA has been extremely consistent and extremely hardworking and diligent in terms of putting together a series of different programs and plans to be able to achieve these targets. Where we come in is really in the last one, where we basically help to provide green financing for these green buildings as well. And if we look at the stats, so I won't bore you too much here with a lot of figures, but I think there's just two key messages here as well. First, if we look at ESG issuances on the real estate market, in the capital markets for the real estate sector, we see that from 2018, on the total deal count, it's almost a 6-fold increase. In terms of total amount raised, you're looking at almost 15-time increase as well. So we do see that in terms of both the issuance deal counts and also issuance volumes, it is quite substantial in the increase. But that being said, if we look at the last line there, despite all of that, if we look at the UNEP report of 2020, this is only 3% of all that is being spent in the real estate sector. This also underlies the huge gap in terms of greening the real estate sector, and therefore more has to be done in order for us to bring in more capital to decarbonize this whole space. This is really our starting point for why we have a lot of conviction in the green buildings thesis, why we also want to be a much bigger player in the space as well. So one of the things that we're very proud of is the work that we did last year with phrases. We alongside other banks, were working to put together a large green loan for Phrases Property for their portfolio of green buildings. And we were very happy that this was awarded the best green loan in Singapore for the real estate sector. And I think for us, this is really something that we're looking to do in a much larger scale and to do it in a much more repeated fashion as well. And so the real challenge is, given that this deal itself took us almost 6 months to put together, how do we accelerate this process? How do we scale this up so that we can cover more buildings and more sectors? This is where having technology, having data from ESGpedia plays a big role. At this point, we have a 3-part process in which we look at sourcing, structuring, and then closing. A lot of the effort at this point really comes down to the part about sourcing. This is an extremely manual process in which we basically monitor a lot of sector news feeds like 明天地, or we look at, for example, talking to a lot of different clients. We basically look through developments on an asset by asset level, and we basically look at how to identify new opportunities or new green buildings we're able to fund. Throughout this whole process, we think a lot to ourselves, how can MUFG differentiate our approach to this? How can we make this more efficient? How can we make this a lot better? And therefore, we came to this conclusion that to unlock financing at scale for the real estate sector, a lot needs to be done to make this a lot faster. Number 2, we need to engage our clients in a more thoughtful way as well. Therefore, we started on a pilot program with STACS almost 6 months ago. So it's been a 6-month journey working with them. We looked at this pilot program primarily in Singapore and Hong Kong, because that's where a lot of our real estate exposure is at. We put together a list for pilot companies, specifically focusing on green building certificates, looking at different entities, and tracking issue dates and expiry dates. I'd like to share a bit more about our results here. So what we liked about having this in ESGpedia was in one glance, in one frame, if you were to put in the name of a corporate or any real estate developer, you would pull up a list of all the certs that they have. We always joke within our team, if you have enough interns and enough patience, you could do this manually. But we prefer to just do it in a much quicker way like this. So this is a lot faster because within 5 minutes, you can pull this data up. You can filter it any way you want. You can look at different expiry dates to only filter for the ones that are certified or for the ones that are also expired to really get the data that you want. This enables you to reach the client in a much more effective way. And what we liked was when we drilled down into individual buildings, we see that there is very updated data there as well. What this really allows us to do is get the RMs equipped so that they can have a much more thoughtful conversation with the client. Instead of doing the whole how are you thing, you basically are able to get into the conversation ASAP by saying, hey, I noticed that you got this building that you have 100 days left in order for it to be recertified. What are your thoughts around that? Would you need financing around that? Those are the questions that we want our RMs to ask the client ASAP. And that will help trigger an entire thought process around how we can do more for them. It also adds value to our client as well. We also really like the whole portfolio feature. So I created a sample portfolio called SG Real Estate 2, basically looking at buildings in Singapore. What I liked about it was you're able to create this portfolio and you can filter for what you like in terms of countries. You can look at certs, you can look at types of buildings, types of certs. And the coolest part about this whole thing was I like the last bit where you're able to send an alert to yourself. So every morning you wake up with a nice email from these guys telling you what has changed and what will change. And those are the few elements that we really enjoy about working with ESGpedia, because we know that it's not been an easy journey and we ourselves are not an easy customer. We give them a lot of headache by sending them a lot of our things they want to change. But I think I'm really glad to see that after 6 months, we do see a lot of interesting changes that has made our workflow a lot better as well. In terms of looking forward on what we're looking to do, a couple of things here. First one is we're looking to have really a lot more features that we can add here as well. One of the things is how we can basically understand status. So for example, if something is in progress, what's the timeline on that? This gives us almost like a little bit of an edge where if we see a building go from in progress to certified, it allows us to have that conversation with the client to say, hey, I noticed that this thing just got green. How about we talk about financing around that? Next thing is that we're looking really to expand coverage to other Asian countries. MUFG currently operates or works with 4 other partner banks in the region, primarily in Thailand, Indonesia, Philippines, and Vietnam. And we would love to be able to take this program and increase coverage to cover all those countries as well. Finally, what we do at MUFG is also we're looking to really decarbonize our portfolio by 2050. And so to that end, MUFG has released in our most recent progress report the underlying carbon emission data for our real estate portfolio. We have targets in 2030 and 2050 as well. And so we're working with STACS to really understand how we're able to get the underlying data, starting with BCA and Singaporean buildings, so that we're able to have a more granular and more asset level view of individual buildings' carbon emissions profile as well. So with that, I know that I have taken 10 minutes already, so maybe I'll pause here to see if any questions. If not, we'll go for beers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nereen. So I think first question on my end, you have clearly outlined the next steps, of the sustainability journey. So I think for this presentation, it's been focused a lot on the real estate sector. So would there be any further sectors, that MUFG will be looking towards, getting the data as well?
Sure. So I think for us, our starting point here is to look at where the carbon is from. The real estate sector remains the largest broad sector that we are able to use to be able to decarbonize as well. I'll answer that in a bit. So for us, starting at real estate makes sense because looking at real estate also helps you to understand the upstream, which is looking at steel, glass, and cement as well. So from real estate, we can cover different things. Other themes that we're looking at really is transportation, looking at things like electric rail, EVs. That's a big theme for us. We're very interested in that. Power is another big sector we're interested in as well. On the social side, we're very interested in looking at social financing, looking at affordable housing, and how we can unlock more of that as well. So that's really something that we're interested in. I will tackle the first question. I would say it really depends on how we look at it. So what we do is that we still have the same goal as UOB in terms of getting to net zero by 2050 itself. With BCA's target of 80, 80, 80 by 2030, it's a bit of a mouthful, I know. I say it a lot of times in the office, so it's a bit of a 80, 80, 80 by 2030 only really gets us to a point where 80% of buildings are green certified. After being certified as green, there still remains a lot of work for you to upgrade. Just looking at BCA itself, you start with being certified, then you get to gold, then there's also platinum. Even at platinum, there are things that you can improve and optimize. For us to get to net zero, it requires buildings to really come up that curve. That requires a lot more time as well. So what we do say is that even if we do BCA's target, we will still need more time to really optimize and do a lot better on those fronts as well.
Yeah, thank you. So I think moving more towards the data portion, I think you mentioned the BCA Green Mark certification. So how would that actually compare with international green building certifications? Example being LEED or BREEAM, etc.
So I think first up, it's hard doing apples comparison because everyone uses slightly different set of metrics, number one. Number two, they weight it slightly differently as well. What we do look at is really, we look at the broad categories to make sure that it tackles all the material areas for real estate. For example, looking at carbon emissions, water, energy. We also look at, for example, livability and survey by tenants as well. So we do look at these factors, and I would say across these things, between international and BCA Green Mark, you see very similar things being tracked. For us, that gives us comfort that we actually have very comparable, I would say, at least standards, but you will not have a direct comparison across those as well.
Thank you. So I think moving deeper, into the asset data, so I think there have always been issues of privacy, data privacy, data confidentiality. So with using ESGpedia, do you actually foresee any risk of such confidential data? It could be financial data, or it could even be carbon emissions data, which could be sensitive for the corporates themselves. So I just wanted to see your take on that.
So I think there's a very real concern with privacy in any kind of platform as well. I think in our pilot program with ESGpedia, number one, it was very focused on the real estate sector in Singapore and Hong Kong. Number two, we are actually really scraping public data and putting it on the site itself. So in a sense, all data that we're accessing is really public information. It's just that what ESGpedia does is package it in a way that is very easy for us to consume and analyze in real time. So I would say this is a real concern, and I think there are definitely issues you have to fix along the way. Having an API and having cybersecurity platforms or protocols in place do make a difference on that. But I would say in the pilot program that we were running, it wasn't as big of a factor because data was all public to begin with.
Thank you. So now towards MUFG's internal sustainability plan. So I think this question is more on the approach, of carbon neutral versus net zero. So what is the approach that you guys are actually going towards in terms of your sustainability journey?
Sure. So I think for us, we basically take a more scientific approach by looking at what are the bigger drivers for carbon emissions in our portfolio. If we look at some of our disclosures so far, the main sectors are really looking at power, steel, cement, glass, paper, and chemicals as well. So these are the sectors that we're starting first to really help them to go on the transition pathway and to decarbonize. I think once we finish those, we will be looking at other sectors in which we would derive our next level sources of carbon as well.
Thank you. So I think moving on to the data portion, I think embodied carbon is another popular topic. When we talk about sustainable real estate, which consists of the emissions from construction down to the materials even from that and the transportation as well. So in this aspect, would you be addressing the embodied carbon data as well?
So I'm very glad someone asked this question because we do a lot of work on this. So we have been working very closely with the cement sector over the last 1 year. We have completed 2 transactions in the space, and we're looking to our 3rd one soon. Essentially, what we think about is to really change and to really help to green certain buildings, you have to start from the materials that they have. So what we did was look at it from the cement sector, think about how to decarbonize it, number one. Number two, thinking about how do you finance the integration of new technologies, for example, like carbon capture in cement, so that cement itself becomes some sort of mini carbon sink. So these are these things that we're thinking about when we think about green the buildings for the next round, right? How do you think about these changes? How are you able to finance that? What can you finance in the market at this point? So We will start with cement. We are looking at steel as well. At some point, I'm sure we'll get to the other components of buildings.
Yeah, thank you. So I think last question, so is there a specific reason, why MUFG is actually, viewing or selected the built and environment sector actually as a key sector?
So I think this is something that we've been thinking about a lot. I think we mentioned just earlier, buildings make up 38% of all the emissions globally. It also underpins a number of other key industries, for example, logistics, building materials, and also the power sector as well. So if we start with this sector and we're able to decarbonize it successfully, number one, it will make a huge impact on our finance emissions. Number two, it will also make a huge impact on the world that we live in as well.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Nevin. Yep. So now we'll conclude the Q&A segment. Yep. And I think the interesting part about sustainable real estate, is that it actually or potentially can cut across multiple sectors. In agriculture, we have your plantations. In textile and fashion, we have your factories. And maybe in multiple other sectors, we have your offices as well. Yep. So I think definitely interesting to see how this progresses as well. And of course, ladies and gentlemen, we have now come to the end of today's ESGpedia Industry Showcase event, brought to you by STACS and of course our event partner, AWS. And of course, through this showcase, we hope you have gained a better understanding, of the enhanced data solutions as well in ESGpedia 2.0. And we really look forward, to working with many of you, in this journey as well. And of course, to all the in-person attendees, we will now commence the networking session. Feel free to help yourself to the food on the side there and the free flow beer at the back as well. And to actually end this off, I think sustainability, like all of us know, is actually a journey. So let's work together, support each other, and create a greener world today. Thank you.